on to our public hearings for the night. So the first hearing is the East BayBridge Façade Improvements. Can we have the staff report, please?
Good evening, Commissioners. Right. So tonight we are revisiting the East BayBridge Façade Improvement application for 3839 Emery Street to modify an existing facade. The site location of 3839 Emery Street is part of the East BayBridge Center. It's just west of Emery Street, which is over here, and 40th runs to the north of it along here. For project overview, this application includes facade modifications, new landscaping, 14 new bike racks for the capacity of 28 bicycles, additional lighting, and the narrowing of the main traffic aisle. What this application does not include is changes to the building footprint, changes to the parking lot, or new signage at this time. Although as part of the conditions of approval for this project, there's a requirement that a new master sign program be submitted, since the facades, if approved, will change how the signs area is set up. So at the April 24th meeting, Planning Commissioners provided feedback on this project. One of the items they mentioned was higher quality design for materials and landscaping. You also recommended improvements to the western portion of the project, where the plaza area is located by the smaller stores. The facade area in front of a large retail, it was recommended that that area be removed of obstructions to create a pedestrian promenade area directly in front of the buildings, underneath the awnings. There was also concern about high vehicle speeds on the main traffic aisle directly in front of the facade area, that the intersection to the west of the project, closer to those smaller stores and plaza area, that it was problematic and that needed to be addressed. And it was also requested to look at parking lot improvements for lighting and landscaping and safety. In response to those requests and feedback from the Planning Commission, the applicant has addressed higher quality design by providing new canvas awning material. If you like, on the dais, there is a new materials board. Please be very careful with the metal, the corrugated metal, or not corrugated, the perforated metal there. It's really sharp on the side. So, but that's the new revised board. I do have the old board here for your reference if you would like it. Also, regarding the design, more landscaping has been added. The plans are more detailed. It provides a pedestrian buffer for the promenade that I mentioned before, and also lines either side of the proposed drive aisle, or modified drive aisle rather. Improvements to the western portion include new small storefront awnings, cleaning up the storefront area, and new plaza features, which includes additional landscaping as well. And the facade area in front of the large retail, as requested, has been removed of obstructions, and the bicycle racks have been relocated. To address the high vehicle speeds on the main traffic aisle, the traffic aisle has been narrowed by adding planters to the end of the parking aisles. And we'll look at that in more detail. All of this we'll look in more detail. To address the western intersection, the stop signs are proposed to be relocated. We'll look at that also. And parking lot improvements, there was a lighting survey done, a speed survey done, and landscaping islands will be added to the end of those parking aisles, as I mentioned. The applicant will talk in more depth about the lighting survey and the speed survey. For project overview, this is the daytime. At the very top, there's the existing conditions. In the middle is proposed elevation, and at the bottom is an overhead view. This is the nighttime elevation at the top, and then a lighting example at the bottom. So moving from the east to the west, the project has the highest elevation of the facade on the east side and tiers down towards the west, similar, or the same actually as the what you saw in April. So this what's called large retail A is the most eastern portion of the project. It includes those materials that are found on that board that's up on the dais. And all of the colors that are included for the large retail correlate to the tenants that are anticipated to go in there. As you can see, the landscaping has been added to the front. And one of the concerns last time was around the corner here, that there was not details on the planter area and what was happening with that. It wasn't clear. So there's some minor modifications planned for this area, but essentially this is an area, whoa, sorry about that. Essentially, this is an area of transition, to transition from the new plantings on this block to the existing plantings across the street on the other side of Emery. Here is a nighttime view with the lighting. So retail tenant B, which is mid-block, just west of retail tenant A, which you saw, has a slightly shorter tenant facade area and different color scheme. Here's a night view of retail B. Sports Authority, which is a tenant that will remain, is mid-block closest, is the largest retail tenant closest to the small stores on the western portion of this project. And there's a nighttime view of that. And then the small retail area since last time has the most significant changes. Landscaping has been added to wrap around the corner. And here's an overhead view as well as an elevation. The windows are proposed to be cleaned and modified. New awnings are supposed to go in. The entire project, your concerns about pigeons have been addressed with inclusion of shock tape in the conditions of approval. There's also pedestrian street furniture with tables and chairs. There's additional lighting that's hard to see in this view, but there's two pedestrian lighting sticks that stick up in the middle here. Here's a view from the evening. You can see it better there, the light shining down in the middle of the plaza. In regards to intersection improvements, the applicant is proposing two things, only one of which we'll discuss tonight. This area up here is in response to Fair and Peers looking at the area and suggesting that some signage might help better direct traffic. But as part of that master sign program I mentioned that's required as part of the conditions approval, that signage would be included in that application, and so is not going to be discussed here, but I'm mentioning it since it was part of the traffic study that they did. Over here is the intersection that was discussed as being problematic. So this block here is the Home Depot block. And then over here to the east is the block in question. This is the pedestrian plaza that we're actually looking at tonight. So the existing stop signs are the location of these little red blocks. The issue right here is that it's aligned with this parking aisle. It's not aligned with this, which is where the street comes in from 40th. So the proposal is to shift the stop signs over. This is the existing outlined, shifting it so that the stop signs are now aligned with the main entrance from 40th Street. For the traffic aisle improvement, the existing traffic aisle is 30 feet in width. What the applicant is proposing to do is add 6-foot landscape planters, pardon me, at the end, I apologize. Whoa. At the end of each of the parking aisles to effectively narrow the traffic aisle to width of 24 feet with the intention of slowing traffic by narrowing the lanes. For pedestrian improvements, as I mentioned before, they've cleared the area in front of the facade to create a pedestrian promenade. And all of the features such as bike parking, benches, are moved out of this area. Speaking of bicycle parking, they've moved them out, as I said, into 4 different areas. These are just colored to help draw the eye since it's a little bit difficult to see. They're clustered relatively near each retail location with 4 spaces. That would be 2 bike racks by retail A, 5 I apologize, 5 bike racks for 10 spaces between retail A and B. By Sports Authority, another 5 racks for 10 spaces, and then by the small stores, 2 racks for 4 spaces. At the bottom of the screen, these are the bike racks the applicant is proposing to use. They are consistent with our bicycle rack guidelines and the planning regulations. So an arrow is in the conditions of approval. It says 28 short-term and 9 long-term bike racks. This is supposed to say bicycle parking spaces. If it's kept as bike racks, it's effectively doubling the amount of required bike parking space because each rack holds 2 bikes. So the revised language would be to change bike racks to bicycle parking spaces to clarify what the requirements are. The requirements that you see, 28 short-term and 9 long-term spaces, are consistent with the regulations of new requirements for biking at, are consistent with the planning regulations for required bike parking spaces. So conforming to major design review, this project is consistent with the general plan and the urban design goals. It's also consistent with Emeryville design guidelines and is of high design quality. For the general plan design goals, UDG 19, high quality, facade improvements, modify and integrate existing building features. UDP 14 establishes a more urban character at the East BayBridge district by having a more articulated facade, improving the landscape, and having a more pedestrian-friendly environment. UDP 24, pedestrian priority zone. It has a new landscape buffer between the sidewalk and traffic area, and landscaping also narrows the main traffic aisle. And UDP 33 prevents bulky and monolithic buildings. The new facade breaks up the existing building into more articulated facade. The Emeryville design guidelines, A10 support various modes of travel. There's improved bicycle amenities and also improved pedestrian area underneath the awnings as a promenade. And A13, generous planting strips and large healthy trees. So there's a significant increase in planting, and trees are part of that. E6, use 3D elements such as awning, facade variation, horizontal articulation, all of which are included in this. Wide and continuous sidewalks conform to minimum sidewalk width, and these plans do that by clearing the promenade, effectively does this. And staff finds this to be of high design quality that's compatible with the surrounding area and does not adversely affect the surrounding area. So staff recommends approval this evening. The applicants are available to answer questions. They also have a presentation, and I'm also available to answer questions.
Are there any questions for staff? All right, then at this time, we'd like to invite the applicant up.
Want this one?
Good evening. My name is Marty Potts, MPA, San Jose, California. I'm here, pleased to be here tonight to present to you what we believe to be a very most responsive solution to the East BayBridge Shopping Center. We've come a long way since being before you back in April, in receiving your really, I think, terrific design input. We're very optimistic after hearing our presentation before you this evening that you'll recognize that we've taken the comments very, very seriously and best incorporated into the project. First, I want to thank staff, particularly Sarah, for a great presentation. It's very thorough. Appreciate your guidance and input. We agree with the staff report and the conditions that are contained therein. And I also want to thank the commissioners. I know that several of you took time to meet with us. Really, really appreciate the time. I know everybody's very, very busy. And why is that flipping around? Very, very busy. But we appreciate your input and your guidance. With me tonight, I'm not alone, is Michael Strauss with Federal Realty, the developer and owner of the property, our architect, Rob Anderson, and Gabby Blackburn of Field Paoli, Jamie Beckman with Carducci and Associates, our landscape architect, and our traffic engineer, Ryan McLean with Fair and Piers. Following the presentation, if there's any particular questions for any one of those design disciplines, we're here to certainly address them all. Before I get started with the project, a little background with Federal Realty. They're a national REIT Real Estate Investment Trust, headquartered in Maryland, with their West Coast operations anchored in San Jose. Federal is most well known for its exemplary mixed-use developments, and they own several retail shopping centers across the country. Their most noteworthy project that they own here is in San Jose, Santana Row, which is really a national benchmark for mixed-use developments throughout the country. About 18 months ago, Federal acquired East BayBridge property with a vision of enhancing its retail program, creating a more vibrant and exciting experience for the shoppers. This design proposal, solely driven by the desire of new quality retailers to make Emeryville their home, is the first of many steps to revitalize this shopping center. But as any good developer, we must be prudent and fiscally wise as to what can be done and when. Okay, how do we get this thing going? Oh, it's easy here. Thank you. We're pleased to announce that Nordstrom Rack and Ulta Cosmetics will soon populate the retail landscape where Pacific Sales and Office Max are currently located. Nordstrom Rack and Ulta Cosmetics many times go hand in hand because they're great complementary shopping experiences as retailers. But when you really look at the proposal this evening, we're replacing 2 out of the 20 tenants in the shopping center, which Federal controls. That's 48,000 square feet out of a total 438,000 square feet. The design proposal for you tonight is motivated by bringing these great retailers to the project and strengthening the fabric of the shopping center. But as part of the lure in capturing Nordstrom Rack and Ulta was their need to have retail identity present, which is really the basis of this design proposal. Given that we're merely changing 11% of the tenants in the shopping center that we control, it does not support really much more renovation than what we're proposing this evening. We've expanded the proposed design improvement far beyond these buildings and have stretched the envelope pretty much as far as we can take it, but while continuing to be fiscally responsible and budget sensitive. When we were before you in April, we generally took away from the following key design concerns. Not enough pedestrian design change. Pedestrian experience was poor. Create an overall stronger, more vibrant design, improving the customer shopping experience. The small shops were dismal. Lighting coordination with the building and landscaping seemed to be missing. The safety of the main entry road fronting the buildings. And the concern of the intersection at Home Depot and Starbucks. Our focus was then, and continues to remain, the building edge. The overall parking lot is not changing. The parking quantities are not being modified. The circulation is not being modified. There is considerable landscaping, however, being added, which we'll speak about in a few minutes. If you look up at on the screen, you have Nordstrom Rack in red, and just to the west of that is going to be Ulta between Nordstrom Rack and the existing Sports Authority. The design of the shopping center currently is considerably industrial, which certainly falls within the landscape of the surrounding areas, and East BayBridge is really no exception. The design proposed tonight is a merging of this existing industrial design landscape of Emeryville with the softer fabric of the retailers. As shown in the elevation comparison, with the top photo being the existing building and the bottom photo, or bottom rendering, I should say, being the proposed design, you'll see that the retail overlay fabric, there's a considerable design transformation. While the existing buildings serve as the canvas, new entry portals to each one of the retailers enhance their entries and identifies their personality, with the portals designed in shape and form to be consistent with the industrial vocabulary of the balance of the project. Overall building colors are enhanced, are more vibrant. And there's a proposal to replace the existing canopies with colorful canvas awnings along the entire elevation to soften the harshness of the building and provide a lantern or a halo effect through dramatic lighting at night. The first building I'll talk about is Nordstrom Rack, which is where Pacific Sales is at right now. Their entry is considerably redesigned, and it has been slightly modified from their prototypical. This elevation transcends what Nordstrom Rack believes is their personality and their identity. Each entry to the retailers have enhanced hardscape, but a little bit different than what's in your staff report this evening, and what you see in the presentation tonight is a slight modification to the Nordstrom portal, and that is that we've brought down on the left side of the building you'll see the horizontal blue banding, which is a material that we brought down to the ground to give the elevation more balance. This elevation is Sports Authority. Sports Authority is existing. They're not going anywhere. They're remaining, but we felt that it was important to take this and give it more life and more vibrancy, similar to what we're doing for Nordstrom Rack and Ulta Cosmetics. As Sarah mentioned in her proposal, the biggest change has happened at the small shop tenants. We've been very, very challenged in this area because while we want to create a very nice experience for our customers who come to the shopping center, we also have to be very, very careful that we discourage any after-hours nuisances. The buildings are going to be repainted. The storefront glass is going to be repaired, cleaned. New awnings are going to be replaced. But that's just the beginning of what we're doing to these buildings. This building, I should say. The people space is really, it's going to be its attraction. We are segregating the vehicle driveway with a 10-foot landscape berm to create an enclave area where customers can come sit, relax, enjoy a cup of coffee, read the newspaper, visit, chat, and feel a little bit segregated from the hustle and bustle of the rest of the shopping center. It's going to be considerably illuminated at night, and with wall packs on the building, pedestrian pole lights in the middle of the plaza, which are all part of the staff report package you have in detail, and we can talk about those if you have any questions. The overall customer experience. In any retail shopping center, any retailer will tell you customers have to get to our stores as easy as possible. It's about convenience. This parking lot has direct access from the parking bays directly up into the stores, and all the design efforts that have been placed in the sidewalk has been respectful of making sure that customers have direct access without having to parallel the traffic lane in front of the buildings, as shown in the blue arrows in the exhibit in front of you. The sidewalk in its entirety has been extremely and heavily upgraded. Landscaping along the sidewalk curb on the street edge has been added pretty much opposite every bulb out that has been created in the parking lot at the end of the parking aisles. We've added mid-block gardens that are going to house seating, bike racks, sort of places just to sort of hang out if someone wants to relax. And we've continued to maintain an unobstructed sidewalk, building adjacent, all the way down in front of the building. So while one gets up on the sidewalk, they can cross-shop from building to building without having to engage in any of the vehicular traffic. You'll see in these photos, and this happens throughout the project in front of the small shops as well, is there are some large planters, concrete planters that are elevated. They are going to be gone and removed. It's proposed that the entire walkway be weather protected with canvas awnings all the way down. This slide includes the vocabulary of all the hardscape treatments, furnishings, benches, trees that are going to be put into the project. The landscaping has been chosen to be indigenous to the Bay Area and drought tolerant. Sweet gum and ornamental pear trees are proposed in the sidewalks and in the bulb out planters. Shrubs of various colors and textures while having low maintenance and water use. And vines are proposed to be attached to the steel structure and to the portals to soften the effect as they reach the pedestrian level. We've given considerable thought to how we want the front of these buildings to be illuminated. As important as they are during the day, they're equally important at night. We've carefully planned, and there's a couple of sections that are shown here tonight, we've carefully planned the location of where we're putting lights. At the entries of each tenant, under the portals, will be downlights. The awnings will have lights that will be concealed on the steel beam at the bottom of the awning that shine back at the sidewalk, and then one up high that shines on the face of the awning. Along the building, we'll have lights that shine behind the awnings and at night provide that lantern effect of the awnings. We've carefully planned this so that we can be certain that we don't have any glare or seeing any light sources from any of the public areas. Although if somebody's standing under the building and look back, they're going to see something. But as they approach the building, you won't see any light source, and you just see the glow of the light. There was a lot of discussion last time we were here regarding the traffic speeds along the frontage road. There was discussion about, speed ramps or speed humps, speed bumps, bulb outs, striping, and after consideration with Farron Piers, our traffic engineer, the proposal is to reduce the existing 30-foot wide street to 24 feet. In a result, that will have a calming or a slowing of vehicles as it's narrowed. And the thought was not to stripe the middle of the road, because a stripe down the center line of the road provides a vehicle with a sense of security and safety. So it's all in an effort to slow traffic down. As I said earlier, there's bulb outs in each one that are densely landscaped. So we believe that this is going to be successful in reducing vehicular traffic. This is a view of the street as it exists today in the picture, to what it's going to appear with our proposal. And you can see how landscaped it is on either side. When I drove through the center this evening before coming here, I noticed there were 2 cars that were parked on along the fire lane red curb, and partially still allowing 2 lanes of two-way traffic getting by them. And I think by narrowing this down, that will help eliminate that, as well as adding the planters will help eliminate not loading in the front of the project. I know this is a little small compared to the slide that Sarah presented you earlier this evening, but the extension of Harlan Street from 40th into the project, it became very, very clear after studying the vehicular traffic circulation at the intersection as it approaches Home Depot, with the pedestrian crossing that was definitely a conflict. The solution became kind of elementary. Adjust the driveway to move the intersection over to the main street that comes into the project. The street that comes down off the detail to the bottom, to the south, is really nothing more than a service drive that goes behind the Sports Authority building and Home Depot building. There's very, very little traffic on it. We believe this is the right solution. In addition, signage is proposed to alert vehicles. I can't say direct them because they have choices, but to alert a vehicle that as they enter the project from 40th Street, they have the opportunity to turn right or left and backload the parking lot, versus getting in front of going all the way to the front and then traversing in front of the buildings and then front loading the parking lot. There was a suggestion made, and I think a very good one, that there be a sign added to prevent vehicles who come southbound on Harlan before they get into the shopping center. One might think there's parking by turning right into the residential area. There's no outlet. It's a dead-end parking area. So we want to post a sign there that says no outlet or shopping center parking to prevent that from happening. There is a condition of approval, and we're very fine with it, to introduce bird prevention control devices through the project. Horizontal surfaces will be treated to prevent birds as best we can. I mean, you can never eliminate all of them, but we can certainly detract most of them. Yeah, it's a detail that might bore you. So in conclusion, our team is very pleased with the outcome of our design efforts over the last 3 months after being with you in front of you back in April. We believe the design upgrades to this project are a terrific addition to the city's retail landscape. These tenant leases are executed Nordstrom Rack and Ulta. We intend to immediately move forward upon your approval with our building plans, permits, and construction to deliver these tenants and have them open as soon as possible. We seek your approval tonight of our application as conditioned in the staff report, and we're here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Are there any questions of the applicant?
I have a couple. The existing building along the steel facade, there are diagonal braces, I think, in every bay. And there are also vertical members. And I don't see any of that in any of your renderings for the improvements. And I was wondering, are you planning on removing those, or are they just not showing up in the renderings?
They're being removed.
All right.
Okay. I actually had the same question, so thanks for asking that. The question I have, so in the same section of the development that Commissioner Gunkel was just talking about, in the drawing is the perspective view from the northwest, and I'll take a look at that.
That view?
No, it's actually in our packet. Yes, right there. So in addition to the cross bracing being gone, I was wondering if the window mullions and the window framing on these other smaller retail spaces, are they being painted? Because in this rendering, it looks a lot less shiny than it is in real life. So I just was curious if you're planning on knocking that down a bit with a gray or a darker color similar to the awning.
They will be painted.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. I think that's all the questions I have. Yep.
Actually, I have
Yep.
a couple more. I saw in the packet that the vines are being trained to climb the steel. How are you doing that? Is it with wire or?
They'll typically be either a wire or like a fish line with an eyelet that attaches to the wall, and the vines then grow up on them. If you talk to them nice, they move faster. But I'm just kidding. But it's the maintenance on them. It takes a while to get them up there, but they're actually attached to it by hand. But the wires are put on the portal, or I don't know. We haven't figured out the detail of how we do it on the steel. But on the portal, there'll be like eyelets on it or tabs in which, like a fishing line that you don't really see is attached, and then the vine grows up on it.
And then, have you used this Ottawa light column on other projects, and how durable is it?
I have not used it. I'd have to defer to the designer to answer that. I'm not familiar with it. We believe it's a good solution because it doesn't. It's kind of it's not very ornate. It's very streamlined. Shopping centers take a tremendous amount of abuse, so we expect that it's going to be durable. But I've not used them before. No. Is there a better answer than that?
No, we're just looking. I believe it's a cast iron.
You need to come up and use the microphone, please.
Rob Anderson, Field Paoli Architects. This is a cast element, so it's very durable. It's made to take a high degree of abuse, And we generally vet these through a national group that helps us select light fixtures for, you know, high use, heavily used retail environments. And he was very comfortable with that as a very durable element.
While you're still there, I have a question for you. So there's an LED light feature that's at the Nordstrom rack entrance, correct?
Yes.
And is that dimmable? Are those lights dimmable? I think that was something that we talked about during our initial review.
I believe, did we talk about that? Dimming it? I believe that the LEDs are dimmable. I mean, it's something I can look at, but I'm pretty sure that we can control the intensity of those lights.
I would have the same concern about the awning lighting, the LED strips behind the awnings. Would want to make sure that those are dimmable
Okay,
as well.
all right. I think the answer would be the same there.
Chair Moss. Just a note from staff. We did remember to put in the condition about dimmable lights in the 2 Park on Powell applications that you'll be looking at next, but in looking at this, it appears that we neglected to include it in this one. So if you like, we can add that, what has essentially become a standard condition about dimming lights if they're too bright to the director's satisfaction.
Right.
That would be good.
Any other questions of the applicant?
I just have a quick question. It might be for your landscape person. Are any of the added landscape planters at the end of the parking stalls acting as bioswales or anything for stormwater treatment?
My name's Jamie Beckman with Carducci. We are using them as best management practices for stormwater, not technically biofiltration, because we don't really have the infrastructure to actually construct the biofiltration as it would need to be.
Okay.
But we are using them as sort of flow-through planters.
Catchments, and then they'll flow
Yep.
through and stuff.
It'll
Okay.
flow through. We'll percolate what we can, and what doesn't, we'll filter through the planting and into the storm drain, as it currently does now. We're just sort of...
Which is an improvement over what we have.
Exactly. We're going to treat it as best we can, and then as it flows through, and then into the storm drain.
Good.
I have a couple of questions, though. In terms of the design guidelines that are mentioned here in the staff report talk about the rootable soil volumes, and there's a note from Stephen Batchelder about 36-inch structural soil or silvicells. I just want to make sure that that does comply with our minimum rootable soil volume standards that we have, because I know that the dirt around that area is awful, awful. And I want to make sure that the trees actually
Sarah
grow.
And I actually talked a lot about that, and we volume-wise, we're exceeding, I think is what we figured out, right? We did the calculations.
It will also be in the building plans. It will all be checked at that time to make sure it's consistent with our water efficient landscaping requirements, and our WELO requirements, which require a volume based on tree size. So, yeah.
And I am a little bit concerned about the pyrus, because we've been having lots of problems with fire blight around here, and the pyrus are really susceptible to that. So
Sure.
if you looked at switching those out, that could be a good thing.
And if that comes as a condition, we definitely will look at it. We just felt like it was a lacy enough tree for a retail environment with some good color and flower. So, but if we
Yeah,
can
they've
definitely look
generally
at it.
been handsome trees, but they've been having some problems.
And that's good to know, because we're as well informed as we like to be. We're not quite up on all the sort of the pests in the microclimates of the Bay Area. So.
But she said
I have one question for you. I appreciate the way that you've done it, the way that the drive aisle has been narrowed, sort of on the side, adding the planters on the side away from the building. I'm just curious if there's any reason that couldn't be narrowed on the other side. Those planters moved to the other side as
we were trying to be a little bit of economical judiciousness, I guess, so to speak. We were trying to kind of keep the curb line at the building the same, what it was. We're probably not going to reconstruct that curb. So curb in was where we were focused, but we felt like the better bang for our buck to add landscape holistically along the whole drive was to use every end island, and that gave us a little, gave us a little bit of area to add trees that aren't currently there. So we wouldn't probably add more trees on the building side, which is what effectively allowed us to do on the other side of the driveway. So, but I mean, it's an interesting idea.
Thanks. Any other questions? All right, then we will go ahead and open the public hearing. If there's anyone who would like to speak on this item, please come forward. All right, seeing none, we will close the public hearing. And we will bring this back to the commission for discussion. I think before we get going on discussion, I think this would be a good time to just go around and disclose anything that we might have. I actually have a couple of things, so I don't mind getting us started. So 2 things. I live more than 500 feet from this project, but I am a member of an HOA which owns property within 500 feet of this project. There are some changes to FPPC regulations that were recently adopted that allow me to vote on the project, so I will be remaining here to do that. And then my other disclosure is that I did meet with the applicant last week. Does anybody else have anything?
I also met with the applicant last week.
And I met with the applicant on the 16th.
All right, then I think we can just go around and discuss. Who would like to start us off?
I just have a couple of questions. Charlie, we talked about the bicycle parking outside. I didn't notice anything in the conditions, or I may have just overlooked it, but they talked about inside parking for, I guess, long-term staff. So since we're not seeing the inside plans, how do we guarantee that those spots are going to be there?
In that condition of approval that needs to be modified, it says 28 short-term and 9 long-term spaces. So the 9 long-term spaces will be part of the tenant improvements for the 2 new retail locations for the retail A and B, or Nordstrom and Ulta. So those can't be shown on the plans now because we don't have the tenant improvements for it, but it is part of this condition of approval.
It is condition, okay. Okay, and the others are just the comments overall on the project is, I really like the improvements. I think it's a lot better than what we have compared to what is done at Safeway Pack and Save. You know, there was some improvements there that definitely made the place better, but it wasn't a wholesale improvement of the whole center. I think this is moving that direction, and we have to keep in mind that we still have Home Depot in that same location that's not doing anything at this time. I do think it's important that you're doing the direct access. I liked how you showed how everyone, no matter what parking lane they park in, they're going to walk into the building, because if you don't create a path, the pedestrians and the people will. So it'll become trampled, you know, your landscape and stuff. So we may not have a full lush landscape along the front of that, but I think it's important to have those penetrations so people can go to the stores and not trample the plants to get there. I am a little disappointed in the bike lockers not being included. I understand the reason, but being a person who's buying a bike that now will cost a couple $1,000s, I don't feel really comfortable parking it outside there, and I would prefer it to be in a bike link locker. But it's certainly not going to be something that I'm going to vote against just because of that. But I'd like to see the city make a stronger case for us making bike links, at least 2 or 3 within a project, something that we consider as a condition of approval. And that's all my comments.
Well, I think this vast improvement of what we saw before And I'm glad to hear that we are going to have dimmable lights, and that's going to be a condition.
Yeah, I too want to thank the applicant for the work they've done since we last met. I think the changes are really positive. I do really like the changes to the landscaping. Changes sort of, I really like the changes to the area in front of the smaller shops and the addition of the outdoor seating and the umbrellas. I think that's really going to strengthen that area, make it a much more usable and used area. And the narrowing of the drive aisle is also a positive change. That said, I still am really concerned about the architecture. I just don't think it's good architecture. It's really, I think, as I said at the last meeting, the Nordstrom's rack sort of facade entrance looks really dated, and the other entrances are just very plain. And so I think even with all of these really positive changes, I still have a really hard time making the finding that this project is of a high design quality. I think there are definitely elements of it that are of a high design quality. I think the landscaping is a vast improvement and is definitely there since the last time we saw this, but I just still have a lot of concerns about the actual facade improvements themselves. I don't think they're of good design.
Well, I also think it's come a long way since the last time. I like the improvements to the pedestrian plaza that are being shown, and I really appreciate the addition of the trees, because that parking lot and that shopping center has been really devoid of anything green for a long time, and I would hope that as you go forward you get more trees out in the parking lot, or I don't know whether you're going to redevelop that with structured parking at some time, but definitely it's been something that the Planning Commission has been, in all of the years that I've been on, it's come up over and over and over again that can't we get some more trees in that parking lot. So this is a little nudge in the right direction.
I too want to thank the applicant for taking our comments into consideration and really striving to make some improvements. I too think that the design has come, quite a ways from what it was a few months ago. I really think that the landscape improvements on the Emery Street side and the vines on the frontage are definitely moving in the positive direction. I was thinking, though, and maybe we can go back a few slides to where you're seeing the Emery Street, so across from Pack and Save. Okay, go forward one more. Yeah, so right there, I think you mentioned that as far as the landscape improvements, or I think, Sarah, you mentioned that they were trying to mirror what was happening across the street at Pack and Save, so the landscaping along Emery Street really hasn't changed much. But I think that's actually not a step in the right direction. I would like to see that gray structural frame actually be covered with the similar vines that you have that you're going to train up on the frontage side. Yeah, I don't think that you need to try to mirror what's happening across the street at Pack and Save. And this metal frame, to me, it just sticks out like a sore thumb, even though it's painted gray. So I would have liked to have seen that landscaping improvement there. Other comments? I really like the plaza improvements with the seating and the trees, as others have mentioned, and the umbrellas, and I think that it's really a great improvement to what's there currently. So that said, I'm also very pleased with the additional landscaping that's at the end of the curbs, or the end of the drive aisles, excuse me. I did have a question for Fair and Piers. I just got a copy of their report or their memo a few minutes ago or before the meeting started, and just want to make sure I'm understanding the numbers. Okay, so do you have the memo in front of you? I think it was, okay, it was written by Catherine. So the last paragraph, it talks about the speed survey, and it talks about the average speed. So the main drive aisle with an average speed of 16 miles per hour. So that was the average speed. The 85th percentile speed, or the speed at which 85% of the vehicles are traveling less than or equal to, was observed to be 21 miles per hour. Which is a lot faster than what the posted speed limit is of 10 miles per hour within the site. So then at the last part of the memo, in the 3 bullet points, the first bullet point says that the narrowing of the roadway is expected to decrease travel speeds approximately 12%. So decreasing 21 miles per hour by 12% is bringing it down to like 19 miles per hour. So I want to get more information about that and what your recommendations would be for bringing it down to the posted speed limit.
Okay. Ryan McLean with Fair and Pierce. So the posted speed limit actually doesn't have a lot to do with the speed that vehicles travel. It's really the feel of the road and the physical aspects of that. So with the 30-foot wide street, it feels like a city street almost, and so that's why you see the speeds, creeping up to 25 mile per hour speed limit, perhaps. But with the narrowing, that's the typical range in terms of dropping it down to 19 for that average, or for the 85th percentile. But I think the other things that will start to also bring that speed down is just the increased activity with the activation of the site, and more friction along the corridor in terms with the pedestrians and more vehicles turning in and out there. So that'll bring the speeds down as well. And then the vertical elements that are being added, the trees that are being planted, all those things kind of contribute to a road that feels like you should be traveling slower. And I think in addition to that, the relocation of those stop signs is going to encourage people to actually stop at those stop signs, come to a complete stop, because that's where the major conflict volumes are. So that will also help bring that speed down. So I think all those elements together there'll be more than a 12% decrease. That's kind of the 12% is kind of the statistics with the road narrowing.
Okay, thank you for elaborating on that. Yeah, that actually was a good reminder, because I've gone to the other Nordstrom rack in San Leandro, and because it's so crowded, it actually is very slow, the traffic there. Our current situation is there's not a lot of activity there, and we literally have to dart across that street every single time to get to Sports Authority, because cars are just zooming through there. So thanks for clarifying that. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
As far as the findings, I think the only finding that I'm struggling to make at this time is 2.A13, which kind of says, support development of large, healthy trees. We're kind of getting there with the plaza trees, and as others have pointed out, that's definitely a good move in the right direction. But the parking lot is still unfortunate right now that it's going to stay the way that it is after all the time that we've been striving to get trees in that parking lot. The other finding actually was number 3, where it talks about that the project will not adversely affect the surrounding areas. And I was really concerned about, when I was thinking about that and making that note for myself, I was thinking about the residential tenants across the way with regard to the dimmable lights, so I'm glad that we have that. But just with the parking lot being kind of barren, I think that that does have an impact on that area. I'm still kind of struggling with that. And I understand that the project is a facade improvement project, and the applicant doesn't believe that they really need to improve the landscape in the parking lot beyond the end of the drive aisles. But I feel like in this project, we actually have an opportunity to improve the shading in that parking lot with some canopy, some trees, and provide something that's attractive to the neighboring buildings. I think that opportunity will be lost if there aren't any upgrades at all in the landscaping in the parking lot. Let's see. About the parking lot, so I know you mentioned that, or the applicant mentioned that they're not going to change the number of parking stalls, they're just going to restripe. But one of the concerns that I have from my own experience going to the other Nordstrom rack is that it's a very tight site, there's a lot more room here. The San Leandro site is much smaller, but all of the parking stalls are very tight and small, and it's very difficult to get cars in and out because they're trying to maximize the number of spaces. So I would want to discourage that from happening for this project in the future, and if there's a way to basically restrict making a change to the parking unless it's reviewed at a later date if they want to make changes to add more parking or make the spots smaller. Because right now you can actually get in and out of your car comfortably. Whereas once, things start changing and the demand grows for the shoppers, they're going to start shrinking the parking stalls, and we're going to have the same sort of dismal, crowded, unsafe parking lot that the other Nordstrom rack has. So. And I guess, with getting back to the trees in the parking lot, one of the commissioners mentioned that the soils there are really just awful. So it's kind of difficult to justify putting more trees there. So I'm kind of, unless you do the silvicelles. So I think we might have some magnolia trees that we might be considering relocating. Maybe they can find a home in that parking lot. That's another discussion for later.
Great.
And those are all the comments that I have.
Yeah, I like that you've moved everything, the planters, bike parking, et cetera, out from under the awnings and created the promenade that you have. I think that's a nice element of the design. And I like that you've dropped the one leg down on the Nordstrom rack facade to make it feel a little bit more balanced. I would like to, I would like to make sure that the vines really are trained in some way that they will climb up the steel. And I'm not, a landscape architect, but I know it has a hard time climbing up steel, and I think it would improve the overall design immensely if the vines are actually climbing over a lot of that steel structure. And I know that in the landscape plan, or in the plan in general, you have trees on opposite sides of the drive aisle in some locations and not in others, and I know it has to do with public art that's in those, but I didn't know if there was a way to actually incorporate some trees in those areas and still maintain the visibility of the public art. I think the more trees, the more treed this whole drive aisle has on either side, the nicer it's going to feel, and the slower the traffic will be. I think that's it for my comments.
And I'd just like to make some further comments regarding some of the things we've all said about the project. And the thing I'm looking at from my own point of view is, I think we do have a responsibility for some sort of aesthetics, but there's personal taste aesthetics, and then there's just aesthetics that are poorly done. The facade to Nordstrom's rack is not something I'm quite partial of, but this is a corporate identity, and I don't think it's my responsibility to dictate corporate identity in something. So even though I think there could be a much better design for this, something a little bit more current rather than dated into the 80s. I don't think I want to base my personal decision on approving a project because Nordstrom's rack identity does not meet my personal aesthetic. So, and the thing I'm thinking of here is, I'm thinking these stores probably want to be open by the Christmas shopping season. And if we've just canceled our August meeting, and if for some reason we don't get the 4 votes, which we have to have tonight to push this through, I don't see that happening because we're back in October to approve something like this again. So the way I'm taking a look at this is this shopping center is what it is. And we built this back in the 90s when Emeryville was thankful to get whatever it could get. And this is what I explained to the developers when I met with them. And I think it's our responsibility to make sure that if we get improvements, that we get improvements. But this isn't a wholesale redevelopment of the property, it's a facade improvement. So what I'm doing is taking a look at the project for what it is and hoping that this will spur Home Depot on improving it. Maybe if we get more retail in here and more population here, other places will want to build here, and maybe we'll add retailers to that empty parking lot, and we can do that, those improvements that we want. But I think to say that this project is halfway there, and I can't agree with the conditions or the findings. I'm a little concerned of that and fearful that, we're going to stall this project into, 2015, and we may lose a retailer that I'm particularly partial of, and the people I'm talking at work can't wait for this to open here and, spend their tax dollars in our city.
That said, I'll make a motion to approve.
I would second it.
Is that's with the dimmable lights, with the
Definitely.
changed language on the bicycle rack, and
Right.
I don't know that it needs to be a condition of approval, but I would really like to encourage you to work with them to see about getting some smaller stature trees around the Bullwinkle sculptures maybe, and the vines on the east side of the building.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about a condition about the parking stalls and not shrinking them. So, I mean, I'm going to look to, Charlie, is that something that we can include as a condition of approval, to not increase the number of parking spaces, or is that already provided for in the?
I'm not sure that the PUD has a specific number of parking spaces. I think it might, but that's been modified in the past for Target. I mean, Target, as I recall, reduced the number of parking spaces in their lot in order to make the spaces bigger.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the dimensions are of the existing spaces. I would say, though, that if they were proposing to restripe the parking lot in order to increase or change the number of spaces, it would have to comply with our current code, which requires 8.5 by 18-foot spaces and no compact spaces.
Okay.
So I think, it's probably covered by that.
Okay, if it's covered, I don't need a condition of approval for that.
I would also like to propose a condition of approval that we actually condition the sort of no outlet or similar sign near the residential parking where you sort of get trapped, because I don't think that exists on the plans right now, so I just wanted to make sure that that is included.
I think there is one there now, actually. I saw one this morning.
Is there?
Yeah.
Well, let's make it a condition. If it's there, it's already done. When I first moved here, I turned down that street several times, and so some notice of that would be nice to that this doesn't go through. So, Bez, would you amend your motion to approve those conditions?
Yes.
And I would second that.
Okay.
Well, just to discuss the motion before we vote, I will just say that I think we've been really raising the bar as far as design review, and this being a design review project, I don't know, this level of design really saddens me. you know, I know it's Nordstrom's Rack's corporate identity, but, you know, there's a Target in a Louis Sullivan building in downtown Chicago. You know, so big corporations have different models, and they can adapt their identity to a variety of different settings. And so I think if we impose some better design requirements, we would probably get it. And I did actually show these plans to a lot of people when I received them, and I would say universally they were sort of they were disliked, and that sort of makes me feel vindicated as, you know, as an urban designer, that I'm not just being picky. But you know, everyone I showed them to did not like them, and it's not a design that I am willing to impose on our community or my neighborhood, for that matter, for the next 20 years, because we've been stuck with the existing for 20 years, and we're going to be stuck with the next one for 20 years. So I will just say that before we take a vote.
So is there a suggestion you would make to them that they could say, yeah, we could do that tonight and make it a condition of approval?
No, he's saying he doesn't like it at all, he wants something different.
I mean, I did suggest some very minor changes to them, which I think would, I mean, at a minimum, I think some sort of molding on the top of the, you know, a molding consistent with the architectural style, with this sort of modern style, on top of, like a crown molding on top of these facade entrances, I think would just even improve the look of it. I don't know what anybody else feels.
Can we have a vote on this?
Are you ready? Okay, on the motion with the amended conditions, let's see. Oh, hang on a second. I have to reorder this. Commissioner Cardoza?
Aye.
Commissioner Donaldson?
Aye.
Commissioner Gunkel?
Aye.
Commissioner Keller?
Aye.
Vice Chair Tan?
Reluctant about the trees not being in the parking lot, but aye.
And Chair Moss?
No.
5 ayes, is that right? Yes, 5 ayes, 1 no. The application is approved. This decision may be appealed to the City Council within 15 days.